Let's be real for a second. We are obsessed with billionaires. It's a full-blown cultural addiction. We scroll through their Instagram feeds, watching them launch rockets or sail on yachts the size of a small country. We read articles detailing their morning routines, as if drinking the same kale smoothie will somehow deposit $1 billion into our bank accounts. They are our modern-day royalty, our tech gods, our financial superheroes. The media paints them as visionaries, as geniuses who single-handedly built empires from nothing but a brilliant idea and a garage. We are sold a story, a fairy tale of meritocracy, where anyone with enough hustle can join their exclusive club. It's a powerful narrative, and it's one we desperately want to believe. This fascination isn't just harmless entertainment, it's a carefully crafted public relations campaign. The mythology surrounding billionaires is a powerful tool that shapes how we think about wealth, success, and fairness. We celebrate their fortunes as proof that the system works. See? He did it, so can you. This line of thinking makes us admire the winners of a rigged game, instead of questioning the rules of the game itself. We put them on magazine covers, we watch documentaries about their lives, we buy their books, we consume their stories so eagerly that we forget to ask the tough questions. We're so busy looking up at the stars that we don't see what's happening on the ground around us. The truth is, this mystique serves a purpose. It distracts us. While we are caught up in the drama of who is the richest person of the week, real-world consequences are unfolding. The stories we are told often leave out the most important parts. They skip over the chapters on aggressive tax avoidance, anti-union tactics, and monopolistic practices that crush small businesses. They don't show the underpaid factory workers or the environmental corners that were cut to maximize profits. The billionaire mystique is like a magic trick. The magician wants you to focus on his right hand, waving a shiny wand so you don't see what his left hand is doing. And what they're doing with that other hand affects every single one of us. So why do we keep falling for it? Because it's a simple, compelling story. It's much easier to celebrate an individual hero than it is to confront a complex and often broken system. The idea of a lone genius changing the world is more exciting than talking about tax policy or labor laws. But the reality is that extreme wealth is never created in a vacuum. It's built on the backs of workers, supported by favorable laws, and sustained by a society that has been convinced to cheer for its own economic inequality. It's time to pull back the curtain. It's time to look past the shiny objects and see the machine at work. The story is a lot darker and a lot more important than you think. Let's talk numbers for a minute, because these numbers are insane. The gap between the ultra-rich and everyone else has become an economic Grand Canyon. A handful of individuals now hold more wealth than billions of people combined. Think about that. While families are struggling to pay for groceries, to afford rent, or to cover an unexpected medical bill, a tiny fraction of the global population is accumulating wealth at a rate that is hard to even comprehend. This isn't just about some people having bigger houses or nicer cars. This is about a fundamental breakdown in our economic and social fabric. It's a divide so vast it distorts everything it touches. This isn't an accident, this is by design. The economic policies of the last 40 years have been a rocket ship for the rich and a treadmill for everyone else. Tax cuts for corporations and the wealthiest individuals were supposed to trickle down to the rest of us. But the trickle was more like a dripping faucet in a drought. Meanwhile, wages for the average worker have stagnated, a polite way of saying they haven't gone up much at all when you account for the rising cost of living. The rules of our economy have been systematically rewritten to favor capital over labor, to reward shareholders more than the employees who actually create the value. This isn't a bug in the system, it has become the primary feature. The consequences of this divide are not abstract, they are real and they are brutal. Inequality is not just an economic issue, it's a social poison. It corrodes trust, fuels political polarization, and limits opportunities for entire generations. When you have extreme wealth concentration, you get a society of winners and losers, with very little in between. Access to good schools, quality healthcare, and even a safe neighborhood becomes a luxury item available only to those who can afford it. The American dream, the idea that your children will have a better life than you did, starts to feel like a cruel joke. The ladder of opportunity has been pulled up, and the people at the top are telling us to just jump higher. So when we talk about billionaires, we're not just talking about money. We are talking about two entirely different realities coexisting in the same country. One reality is for the people who own the system and the other is for the people who live in it. One group worries about which private jet to take to their private island. The other group worries about how to make it to the end of the month without going into debt. This isn't about envy or jealousy, it's about fairness. It's about questioning whether a system that produces such extreme outcomes is a healthy or sustainable one. The Great Divide is the central story of our time, and it's a story we need to understand. Here's the thing about having $1 billion. It's not just money, it's power. It's a megaphone that can drown out every other voice. It's a key that can unlock any door in Washington, D.C. Billionaires don't just participate in the economy. They actively shape the rules of the game to their own advantage. They use their immense wealth to influence politics in ways that ordinary citizens simply cannot. They are not just playing on the same field as the rest of us. They are the ones who own the stadium, hire the referees, and write the rulebook. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is just how modern politics works. It's pay to play, and they are the ultimate players. How do they do it? Let's break it down. First, there's lobbying. Billionaires and the corporations they control spend staggering amounts of money to hire armies of lobbyists. These are well-connected insiders whose entire job is to whisper in the ears of politicians, pushing for tax loopholes that save them billions, or fighting against regulations that might protect workers or the environment but would hurt their bottom line. They are not asking for favors, they are making investments. They invest in politicians and policies that will deliver a massive return on their investment. It's the best business deal you could ever imagine. Spend a few million on lobbying to get a few billion in tax breaks. Then you have campaign contributions. Our political system runs on money, and billionaires have an endless supply. Through super PACs and other opaque funding vehicles, they can pour unlimited cash into elections to support candidates who will champion their interests. This isn't about supporting democracy, it's about buying outcomes. When a politician knows that their re-election campaign can be funded or destroyed by a single wealthy donor, who do you think they are going to listen to? The voter who can give them $25, or the billionaire who can give them $25 million? It fundamentally warps the principle of one person, one vote. It creates a government that is responsive to its donors, not its citizens. But their influence doesn't stop there. Billionaires also shape public opinion itself. They own major media outlets, newspapers, TV networks, and influential websites. This allows them to control the narrative, to decide what stories get told and how they get framed. They also fund think tanks, academic institutions, and advocacy groups that produce research and expert opinions that just so happen to align perfectly with their own financial interests. They create an entire ecosystem of information that reinforces their worldview and makes their policy preferences seem like common sense. It's a sophisticated and powerful way to manufacture consent and ensure that the public debate stays within limits that are safe for them. So, after all this, what is the real conversation we need to have about billionaires? This isn't an attack on success. It's not about hating people who build a great company or invent something amazing. This is about a system. It's about a set of rules that has allowed wealth to concentrate to a degree that is now actively damaging our democracy, our society, and our economy. We need to move beyond the celebrity gossip and the glossy magazine covers and start asking some fundamental questions about what kind of world we want to live in. We have to look at the full picture, not just the highlight reel they want us to see. The big question is this: is it right for any single person to have that much power? Is it healthy for a democracy when a handful of individuals can spend more money on politics than entire states? Is it fair when the person who cleans the floors in a hospital pays a higher effective tax rate than the billionaire who owns the hospital chain? These are not radical questions. They are basic questions of fairness and justice. They are questions that get to the heart of the social contract we are supposed to have with one another. The existence of billionaires in their current form is a symptom of a deeper problem, and we can't fix the problem if we're afraid to even name it. This documentary, this series, is about starting that conversation. It's about providing the context that is so often missing from the mainstream narrative. We're going to break down, step by step, how these fortunes are really made. We'll look at the business practices, the political maneuvering, and the legal loopholes that make it all possible. We'll explore the impact this has on all of us, from the jobs we work to the schools our kids attend. We will investigate their charity, their philanthropy, and ask whether giving away a fraction of a fortune that was accumulated through questionable means is really a solution, or just part of the problem. Ultimately, this is a story about power, and what happens when it becomes too concentrated in too few hands. It's about whether we want a society that works for the few, or a society that works for the many. The goal here is not to give you all the answers. The goal is to give you all the information, so you can start asking the right questions. Because the future is not yet written. The rules can be changed. But first, we have to be honest about the game we are all being forced to play. We have to understand the dark truth about billionaires. Let's get into it. Alright, let's kick this off with the origin story we all know and love, the startup myth. You know the one. A lone, brilliant founder, usually a college dropout, tinkering away in a dusty garage. He has nothing but a revolutionary idea, a ramen noodle diet, and an unshakable belief in his own destiny. Suddenly, boom, a flash of genius. He builds a world-changing product, and through sheer grit and brilliance, he becomes a billionaire. It's the story of Apple, of Microsoft, of Facebook. It's the Silicon Valley gospel preached from the cover of every business magazine. And it's a beautiful story, it's inspiring, it's also mostly fiction, or at the very least it's a version of the story with some very important pages ripped out. The reality is that these lone geniuses rarely start with nothing. They often come from backgrounds of significant privilege. We're talking about access to elite universities, family connections, and safety nets that allow them to take huge risks that a normal person couldn't even dream of. That garage? It might be attached to $1 million home in a wealthy suburb. That initial funding? It often comes from well-connected family friends or wealthy angel investors who travel in the same circles. This isn't to say they aren't smart or hardworking, but the narrative that they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps conveniently ignores the fact that they were born wearing a very expensive pair of boots to begin with. Furthermore, the brilliant idea itself is rarely as original as the myth suggests. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It builds on decades of publicly funded research and development. The internet, GPS, touchscreen technology, the microchips in our phones, these are all foundational technologies that were developed with massive government investment, primarily through military and university research. Private companies and their founders then come along, package this public research into a sleek consumer product, and claim all the credit and all the profit. They are not inventing fire, they are building a really fancy lighter using a flame that someone else, the taxpayer, already lit for them. It's a genius business move, but it's not a story of solitary creation. So why is this myth so powerful? Why do we cling to it? Because it justifies the outcome. If we believe that billionaires are singular self-made heroes, then their extreme wealth feels earned and deserved. It shuts down any questions about the system that produced them. It makes their fortune a result of individual merit, not a result of privilege, public investment, and perfect timing. The startup myth isn't just a story about the past. It's a powerful tool used to protect their status in the present. It's the first and most important piece of PR in the billionaire playbook. And it's time we stopped reading it as fact and started seeing it for what it is, a very, very good story. Once a company gets off the ground, how does it become a world-devouring behemoth? How does its founder become a billionaire instead of just a regular boring millionaire? The answer is often simple. They stop competing and start conquering. They move from innovation to domination. The strategy is often called buy or bury. If a smaller, innovative company pops up and threatens your market share, you have two choices. You can either use your massive pile of cash to buy them out, absorbing their technology and eliminating a competitor in one fell swoop, or, if they refuse to sell, you use your market power to bury them. You crush them. It's not about playing the game better, it's about making sure you're the only one left on the field. Let's look at the buy strategy. Big tech companies are masters of this. They act like giant financial sharks, constantly swimming through the waters of the tech scene, looking for the next tasty little startup to devour. Facebook bought Instagram and WhatsApp, Google bought YouTube and Waze, Amazon bought Ring and Zappos. These weren't just business deals, they were strategic assassinations of future competition. By acquiring these potential rivals before they could grow into real threats, these giants cemented their dominance. They didn't have to out-innovate them, they just had to outspend them. This creates a kill zone around major corporations, where new startups are seen not as future competitors, but as future acquisitions, stifling true market disruption. But what happens if a company says no? That's when we get to the bury part of the strategy. This is where the dominant company uses its sheer size and power to make life impossible for the smaller competitor. They might shamelessly copy the startup's key features, and integrate them into their own platform, which already has billions of users. Think about Instagram stories, a direct copy of Snapchat's core feature. The giant can also use its influence to cut off the startup's access to customers or essential services. Amazon, for example, has been accused of using data from independent sellers on its platform to launch its own competing products, and then giving its own products preferential placement on the site. It's like playing chess against someone who can change the rules whenever they want. This behavior is the exact opposite of the free market capitalism we are told to admire. It's classic monopolistic behavior, designed to eliminate choice and concentrate power. For decades, the United States had strong antitrust laws to prevent this, to break up companies that got too big and too powerful. But over the last 40 years, the enforcement of these laws has withered away, thanks in large part to the very lobbying we talked about earlier. The referees have been paid to look the other way. This has allowed a new generation of monopolies to rise, creating a landscape where a few giant companies control the essential infrastructure of modern life, from how we shop to how we communicate. And at the top of these digital empires sit the billionaires who reap all the rewards. Okay, so you've built a monopoly. Now how do you squeeze every last drop of profit out of it? This brings us to a crucial part of the billionaire-making formula, the labor equation. For many large corporations, the path to immense wealth is paved with low wages, minimal benefits, and relentless pressure on workers. Employees are often viewed not as assets to be invested in, but as costs to be minimized. The goal is simple: get the most work possible out of your labor force while paying them as little as possible. This isn't a secret, it's just modern management strategy. It's about tilting the balance of power so far in favor of the employer that workers have no choice but to accept what they're given. One of the key tactics is actively fighting against unionization. Unions are the single most effective tool that workers have to bargain for better wages, safer working conditions, and decent benefits. And that's exactly why many of these giant corporations spend millions of dollars on anti-union consultants and campaigns. They hold mandatory meetings where they spread misinformation about unions. They monitor employee activity and sometimes fire workers who try to organize. The message is clear: we are a family here, and we don't need an outside third party like a union. But in this family, dad takes home billions in profits while the kids get paid wages so low they qualify for food stamps. It's a strategy designed to keep workers divided and powerless. Another part of the equation is the rise of the gig economy and the misclassification of workers. Companies build entire empires using armies of drivers, delivery people, and freelancers who are classified as independent contractors instead of employees. This is a brilliant legal trick. It means the company doesn't have to pay for minimum wage, overtime, health insurance, sick leave, or contributions to Social Security. They get all the benefits of having a dedicated workforce without any of the traditional responsibilities of being an employer. It offloads all the risk and all the costs onto the individual worker, while the company and its billionaire founder capture all the value. It's a way to deconstruct the very idea of a stable job. This relentless downward pressure on labor is a feature, not a bug, of the system that creates billionaire fortunes. When you read about a company reporting record profits, that profit has to come from somewhere. It often comes from the gap between the value an employee creates and the amount they are paid. The wider that gap, the bigger the profit for shareholders and executives. So while the founder is lauded as a visionary for their company's soaring stock price, that success is often directly built on a foundation of stagnant wages and precarious work for the millions of people who actually make the company run. They are the invisible ingredient in the recipe for a billion-dollar fortune. So, you've built a monopoly and squeezed your labor force. You are now generating mountains of profit. The final step in becoming a permanent member of the billionaire class is to make sure you keep that money. And that means avoiding taxes. Now you and I, we pay our taxes. It comes right out of our paycheck, it's not really a choice. But for billionaires, it's a completely different story. They have access to armies of high-priced lawyers and accountants, whose entire job is to play a complex shell game with their money, using every loophole and offshore haven imaginable to shrink their tax bill down to almost nothing. It's a system they helped design through lobbying, and they are its greatest beneficiaries. Let's talk about one of their favorite moves, the buy, borrow, die strategy. It sounds like a bad action movie, but it's how the ultra-rich legally avoid paying taxes on their wealth. Here's how it works. First, they buy assets like stocks, real estate, or art. As these assets grow in value, they don't pay any taxes on those gains because they haven't sold them yet. Then, when they need cash, they don't sell the assets. Instead, they borrow against them, taking out massive loans at super low interest rates. These loans aren't taxed as income, so they can live a lavish lifestyle, spending millions of dollars without ever reporting any taxable income. It's a multi-billion-dollar life funded by tax-free debt. And the final step, die? That's the grand finale. When the billionaire passes away, their heirs inherit the assets. Thanks to a massive loophole in the tax code called the stepped-up basis, the original cost of those assets is stepped up to their market value on the date of death. This means all of those decades of untaxed growth, all those capital gains, are wiped away from a tax perspective forever. The heirs can then sell the assets immediately and pay little to no capital gains tax. It's the ultimate tax dodge, a mechanism that allows dynastic wealth to be passed down from one generation to the next, almost entirely tax-free. It turns the estate tax into a voluntary contribution for the well-advised. This isn't just about a few clever tricks. It's a fundamental feature of a tax system that is designed to tax work, not wealth. A nurse or a teacher who earns their income from a salary can pay a higher effective tax rate than a billionaire who lives off their accumulated wealth. They use offshore tax havens, complex trusts, and anonymous shell companies to hide their money from tax authorities. It's a global game of hide and seek, and they have the resources to be permanently hidden. So when you hear politicians say we can't afford things like better schools or healthcare, remember that there are trillions of dollars in untaxed wealth being hoarded by a tiny number of people who have perfected the art of not paying their fair share. There's a deep irony in the way many billionaires talk about the government. In public, they often preach a gospel of rugged individualism and free market purity. They rail against government regulation, handouts, and wasteful spending. They want the government to stay out of their way and let the magic of the market work. But behind the scenes, it's a completely different story. The truth is, many of these immense fortunes are not only protected by the government, but they are actively propped up by it. They publicly denounce socialism for the poor, while privately enjoying a very comfortable system of socialism for the rich. It's a classic case of do as I say, not as I do. Let's start with bailouts. When a regular person makes a bad financial decision, they face the consequences. They might lose their house or go bankrupt. But when giant corporations and Wall Street banks make reckless bets that threaten to bring down the entire economy, what happens? The government steps in with billions, sometimes trillions of taxpayer dollars to bail them out. The 2008 financial crisis is the perfect example. The banks were deemed too big to fail. This creates a perverse incentive system known as moral hazard. The executives and major shareholders get to keep all the profits during the good times, and when their risky behavior leads to a collapse, the public is forced to cover their losses. Heads they win, tails you lose. Beyond direct bailouts, there are the endless subsidies and tax credits. The government gives massive financial breaks to some of the most profitable industries in the world. The fossil fuel industry, big agriculture, big pharma, they all receive billions of dollars in taxpayer support every single year. These aren't struggling businesses, they are corporate giants with billionaire owners and shareholders. We are literally paying them to do business. These subsidies distort the market, giving an unfair advantage to established, politically connected players, and making it harder for new, innovative companies to compete. It's the government picking winners and losers, and the winners are almost always the ones with the best lobbyists. And let's not forget about the legal and physical infrastructure that protects their wealth. Who enforces the contracts that make their businesses work? The publicly funded court system. Who protects their factories and corporate headquarters? Publicly funded police and fire departments. Who protects their global supply chains and shipping lanes? The publicly funded military. Their entire business model relies on a stable, functioning society that is paid for by all of us. The very concept of private property, the foundation of their wealth, is a legal construct created and enforced by the state. For all their talk of being self-made, they are standing on a platform built and maintained by the very government they so often criticize. Their fortunes would be impossible without it. So you've built your monopoly, squeezed labor, dodged taxes, and cashed your government subsidy checks. You've made your first billion. Congratulations. Now, how do you turn that 1 billion into 10 or 50 or 100 billion? This is where the real magic happens. This is where wealth stops being about building a company or selling a product and starts being about one thing: making money from money. The primary engine for this explosive growth is the stock market, and the fuel is a little thing called capital gains. This is the final stage where wealth becomes almost completely detached from the real economy of making and selling things. A capital gain is the profit you make when you sell an asset, like a stock, for more than you paid for it. In our tax system, this type of income is treated very differently, and much more favorably, than the income you get from working a job. While wages are taxed at ordinary income tax rates, which can go up to 37%, long-term capital gains are taxed at a much lower rate, topping out at just 20%. This single policy is one of the biggest drivers of wealth inequality. It means that the person who makes their money by sitting on a portfolio of stocks pays a much lower tax rate than the person who earns their money by actually working for a living. It's a massive subsidy for the wealthy. This is how the rich get richer seemingly without doing anything. Their existing wealth invested in the market does the work for them. $1 billion stock portfolio can generate tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars a year in dividends and capital appreciation. This new wealth is then reinvested, and the process repeats. It's the power of compound interest on an unimaginable scale. It creates a powerful feedback loop. Wealth generates more wealth, which then generates even more wealth. This is why you see billionaires' fortunes skyrocketing year after year, even as the wages of ordinary people stay flat. They're playing a different financial game, with a completely different set of rules that heavily favor them. This system creates a permanent investor class, a modern aristocracy whose position is secured not by land, but by capital. Their fortunes grow automatically, protected by preferential tax treatment and managed by sophisticated financial firms. They are no longer entrepreneurs taking risks, they are financial entities, accumulating power through passive ownership. This is the endgame of billionaire creation. It's a self-perpetuating machine that concentrates more and more of the world's wealth into fewer and fewer hands. It's a system that has become profoundly disconnected from the values of work, innovation, and shared prosperity. And it's a machine that, if left unchecked, will continue to churn out inequality on an ever-increasing scale. Let's get straight to the point. In modern politics, money is not just speech, it's a megaphone that can silence everyone else. When billionaires decide to get involved in politics, they don't just participate like you or I do. They don't just put a bumper sticker on their car or donate $25 to a candidate they believe in. They fundamentally reshape the entire political landscape to serve their own interests. They can flood the system with so much cash that the voices of ordinary citizens become little more than a whisper in a hurricane. This isn't about civic engagement, it's about a hostile takeover of the democratic process itself, funded by fortunes so large they are difficult to even imagine. The primary weapon in this takeover is the campaign contribution. Thanks to a series of court decisions, most famously Citizens United, billionaires can now pour virtually unlimited and often untraceable dark money into elections through vehicles like super PACs and 501c4 social welfare organizations. These groups can run endless attack ads, fund massive get-out-the-vote operations, and essentially function as a shadow campaign for their preferred candidates. A single billionaire can single-handedly finance a candidate's entire run for office, creating a dynamic where politicians are more accountable to their wealthy benefactors than they are to the actual voters in their district. It's a direct challenge to the core principle of one person, one vote. Think about the chilling effect this has. A politician knows that their political survival might depend on keeping one or two ultra-wealthy donors happy. Are they going to vote to raise taxes on the rich even if it's popular with their constituents? Are they going to support stronger environmental regulations that might hurt the profits of their billionaire backers' company? It creates a system of legalized bribery, where policy is auctioned off to the highest bidder. The issues that get debated and the laws that get passed are not necessarily the ones that benefit society as a whole, but the ones that benefit the tiny sliver of the population who can afford to buy influence. This checkbook takeover creates a government that is perpetually responsive to the needs of capital, not the needs of people. It means that issues critical to working families, like affordable healthcare, rising wages, and the cost of education, are often pushed to the back burner, while things like capital gains tax cuts and corporate deregulation get fast-tracked. The political agenda itself is set by the donor class. They don't even need to win every fight. Their constant, overwhelming presence in the system ensures that the range of what is considered possible in politics always stays within boundaries that are safe for their fortunes. It's a quiet, insidious, and devastatingly effective way to control power. If campaign contributions are the air support, lobbying is the ground invasion. It's the day-in, day-out work of influencing policy, and billionaires and their corporations have built a machine that is second to none. They spend billions of dollars every year to deploy a private army of lobbyists in Washington, D.C., and in state capitals across the country. These aren't just any slick talkers. They are often former members of Congress, high-level congressional staffers, and well-connected insiders who have deep relationships with the very lawmakers they are paid to influence. They have unparalleled access, walking the halls of power and getting private meetings that are simply unavailable to the average citizen or a small community group. The goal of this lobbying machine is brutally simple: to shape legislation for profit. They are there to insert specific loopholes into the tax code that can save their client billions of dollars. They are there to weaken regulations on pollution, financial risk, or worker safety that might impact the bottom line. They are there to fight against any new law that might increase their costs or reduce their market power. It's a highly targeted, highly effective operation. For every dollar spent on lobbying, companies can get a return of over $100 in tax breaks and government contracts. It is, without a doubt, the single best investment a major corporation can make. This constant pressure from corporate lobbyists has a corrosive effect on the lawmaking process. It means that bills are often written not by elected officials seeking to serve the public good, but by corporate lawyers and lobbyists seeking to serve their clients' interests. They provide the expert testimony, they draft the legislative language, and they offer cushy future job prospects to the staffers and politicians they work with. This creates a system where complex legislation, often hundreds of pages long, is filled with hidden clauses and special carve-outs that are nearly impossible for the public or the press to decipher, but which deliver massive benefits to specific industries and companies. It's how the sausage gets made, and it's not pretty. Ultimately, this lobbying machine drowns out the public interest. For every one lobbyist representing unions or environmental groups, there are dozens representing corporate interests. The playing field is not level. It is tilted so steeply that it's almost vertical. Lawmakers are constantly bombarded with the sophisticated, well-funded arguments of corporate America, while the concerns of ordinary people struggle to even get a hearing. This ensures that the laws of our country are systematically skewed to favor the wealthy and the powerful, creating a vicious cycle where their economic power translates into political power, which they then use to accumulate even more economic power. It's a feedback loop that is central to the story of modern inequality. Power isn't just about passing laws, it's about controlling the world of ideas. It's about making your preferred policies seem not just beneficial to you, but inevitable, logical, and supported by impartial experts. This is where the billionaire-funded think tank comes in. Over the past few decades, wealthy individuals and corporations have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into creating and sustaining a vast network of think tanks. These organizations have respectable, academic-sounding names, like the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, or the American Enterprise Institute. And their purpose is to produce a steady stream of reports, studies, and opinion pieces that advocate for a specific pro-corporate, anti-regulation, low-tax ideology. These are not neutral research institutions. They are idea factories with a political agenda. They exist to provide the intellectual ammunition for the policy battles that their funders want to win. Need a study that says cutting taxes for the rich will create economic growth? A think tank will produce it. Need an expert to go on television and argue that climate change regulations will destroy the economy? A think tank will provide one. They create a powerful echo chamber, where the same talking points are repeated by a chorus of credentialed scholars and fellows, giving the impression of a broad intellectual consensus where none may actually exist. It's a brilliant strategy to legitimize a purely self-interested agenda. The influence of these think tanks is immense. Their scholars testify before Congress, their articles are published in major newspapers, and their staff are quoted as impartial experts in news reports. They provide ready-made talking points and prepackaged policy proposals for friendly politicians and journalists. This creates an entire intellectual infrastructure that supports the billionaire worldview. It helps to shift the entire spectrum of political debate over time. Ideas that were once considered extreme, like privatizing Social Security or eliminating the minimum wage, are gradually laundered through this ecosystem until they become mainstream policy options, discussed seriously in the halls of power. It's a long game, and they play it very well. By funding this network, billionaires can effectively manufacture consent for the policies that benefit them most. They create a climate of opinion where their interests are framed as the public interest. It makes it harder for alternative ideas to gain traction, as they are often dismissed as unserious or radical in comparison to the common-sense solutions being pushed by the think tank echo chamber. This control over the world of ideas is one of the most subtle yet most powerful ways that extreme wealth distorts our democracy. It doesn't just buy votes, it buys the very arguments and facts that shape how we all think about the economy and society. Beyond funding think tanks, some billionaires take a more direct approach to shaping public opinion. They simply buy the megaphone itself. A growing number of the most influential media outlets in the country, newspapers, magazines, and television networks, are owned by billionaires. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, Rupert Murdoch's family controls Fox News, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Post. Patrick Soon-Shiong owns the Los Angeles Times. While these owners often claim to respect the editorial independence of their newsrooms, their ownership inherently shapes the direction, focus, and priorities of the organization. The power to hire and fire the top editors is the ultimate form of influence. This ownership of the media has profound consequences for the national conversation. It allows a handful of individuals to set the agenda, deciding which stories are important and which are ignored. Stories that are critical of corporate power, wealth inequality, or the political influence of the rich may be downplayed or framed in a way that is more favorable to the owner's interests. Meanwhile, stories that align with their business or political goals can be given prominent, sustained coverage. This isn't necessarily about direct, top-down orders to kill a story. It's often more subtle. A culture of self-censorship where journalists and editors know which topics are best to avoid if they want to advance their careers. Furthermore, billionaire media ownership can turn news outlets into powerful political weapons. They can be used to promote preferred candidates, attack political opponents, and push a specific ideological worldview. Fox News, for example, has been incredibly effective at mobilizing a political base and shaping the agenda of the Republican Party. This blurs the line between journalism and activism, turning what should be a source of objective information into a tool for partisan warfare. When the institutions we rely on to be neutral arbiters of fact are owned by individuals with a vested financial and political stake in the outcome, it becomes incredibly difficult for citizens to get the information they need to make informed decisions. The consolidation of media ownership in the hands of a few billionaires is dangerous for a healthy democracy. A free and diverse press is supposed to act as a watchdog, holding the powerful accountable. But what happens when the powerful own the watchdog? It creates a massive blind spot in our public discourse. It ensures that the perspectives and priorities of the wealthiest members of society are consistently amplified, while alternative viewpoints are marginalized. It means that the very system that creates and sustains their immense wealth and power is less likely to face the critical scrutiny it deserves. Owning the megaphone means you can largely control the song everyone sings. One of the most effective and cynical ways that corporate power influences government is through the revolving door. This is the constant, seamless flow of individuals between jobs in government and high-paying positions in the private sector, particularly in lobbying firms and the corporations they once regulated. A member of Congress who was in charge of writing banking laws suddenly leaves office and gets a seven-figure job as a senior executive at a Wall Street bank. A top official at the Environmental Protection Agency who weakened pollution rules gets hired as a consultant for a major oil company. It happens so often that it's considered a normal part of a successful career in Washington. This practice creates deeply perverse incentives for people in public service. If a regulator knows that a lucrative job is waiting for them in the industry they are supposed to be overseeing, are they going to be tough and aggressive in their enforcement of the law? Or are they going to be more lenient, hoping to curry favor with their future employers? It's a form of deferred bribery. It encourages government officials to think not about the public interest, but about their own future career prospects. It essentially turns their time in government into an audition for a much higher paying gig in the private sector, fundamentally compromising their role as public servants. The revolving door also gives corporations an incredible advantage. By hiring former government officials, they gain invaluable inside knowledge of the system. These former insiders know the loopholes in the laws they helped write. They have personal relationships with their former colleagues who are still in government, giving them unparalleled access and influence. They know how the regulatory process works from the inside, and they know exactly which levers to pull to get the results their new corporate masters want. It's like a sports team stealing the other team's playbook and hiring their star quarterback to be a consultant. It makes the contest fundamentally unfair. This constant churn of personnel between government and industry blurs the line between the regulators and the regulated. It fosters a cozy, club-like atmosphere where everyone knows each other, and the interests of powerful corporations become intertwined with the business of government. This system is a major contributor to regulatory capture, where government agencies that are supposed to serve the public end up serving the interests of the industries they are meant to regulate. The revolving door ensures that the perspective of big business is always well represented, both inside and outside the halls of government, further cementing the power and influence of the billionaire class. The ultimate power in any society is the power to write and interpret the law itself. For decades, a coordinated and lavishly funded campaign by wealthy conservatives has focused on capturing this ultimate prize, the American judiciary. Realizing that courts can either uphold or strike down democratically passed laws, they have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into a project to reshape the federal courts, from the Supreme Court down to the lower district courts. This isn't just about winning a single case, it's about installing a generation of judges who share their specific legal philosophy. One that is consistently friendly to corporate power, hostile to regulation, and skeptical of workers' rights. This effort is spearheaded by groups like the Federalist Society, which has become a powerful pipeline for conservative judges. Lavishly funded by anonymous billionaire donors, this organization grooms and vets judicial candidates who adhere to a particular interpretation of the Constitution, often known as originalism. They have created a network that effectively pre-approves judges for Republican presidents, ensuring that judicial nominees are reliably pro-business. The result is a federal judiciary that has been systematically stacked with judges who are far more likely to rule in favor of corporations against consumers, employers against employees, and polluters against environmental protection. It's a quiet revolution that has profoundly shifted the balance of power in America. The impact of this judicial strategy is enormous and long-lasting. Federal judges have lifetime appointments, meaning their influence extends for decades, long after the presidents who appointed them have left office. These courts have weakened the power of labor unions, struck down campaign finance regulations, and made it harder for government agencies to regulate big business. The Supreme Court's Citizens United decision, which opened the floodgates for billionaire spending in elections, came from a court shaped by this very movement. This strategy allows the billionaire class to achieve their policy goals through the courts, even when they can't win them through the democratic process. It's an end run around public opinion. This capture of the judiciary represents the deepest and most durable form of political influence. It's about fundamentally changing the rules of the game in their favor for generations to come. When the ultimate arbiter of the law is systematically biased towards your interests, your power becomes almost unassailable. It creates a legal system that is more likely to protect property and capital than people and the planet. Justice is supposed to be blind, but this billionaire-funded project has spent a fortune to make sure the courts are looking out for their interests. It is the final and most formidable layer of power and influence that extreme wealth can buy. Let's be clear. The gap between the super rich and everyone else is no longer just a gap. It's a chasm. It's a dimensional rift. Billionaires and the average person are not just living different lives, they are inhabiting entirely different planets that happen to share the same atmosphere. For most people, life is a constant navigation of financial pressures. It's about budgeting for groceries, stretching a paycheck to cover rent, and honestly, just hoping the car doesn't break down. It's a world of trade-offs, anxieties, and the persistent, low-grade stress of economic insecurity. The primary concern is getting by, making it to the next month, and hoping for a little stability in a world that feels, well, increasingly unstable. This is the reality for the vast majority. On the other planet, the planet of the billionaire, the very concept of money has lost all meaning. It is no longer a tool for survival, but a mechanism for shaping reality itself. Their concerns aren't about budgeting, but about legacy. They don't worry about affording a home. They worry about which of their multiple mansions spread across different continents to visit. They travel not on commercial airlines with the rest of us, but on private jets that cost more per hour than most people make in a year. Their children attend exclusive schools. Their health is managed by concierge doctors, and their security is handled by private firms. They live in a gilded bubble, completely insulated from the everyday struggles and realities of the society they profit from. This isn't just about luxury, it's about a fundamental separation from the shared experience of humanity. When you can buy anything you want, you lose a connection to the world that most people know. The public parks, the public schools, the public transportation systems, these are things that the rest of society depends on, but which billionaires can opt out of entirely. This creates a dangerous empathy gap. How can you understand the importance of a crumbling public transit system when you've never had to rely on it? How can you appreciate the crisis of affordable housing when you own more houses than you can possibly live in? This detachment makes it easier for them to support policies that harm the public because the consequences will never touch them. The lifestyles of the ultra-rich are relentlessly marketed to us as aspirational, a dream to strive for. But the reality is that this extreme luxury is a direct consequence of the economic precarity faced by millions. It is a symptom of a system that is profoundly out of balance. The existence of a class of people who can afford to buy private islands and space flights, while others cannot afford insulin or a place to live, is a stark indictment of our priorities. We are living in a tale of two worlds, coexisting in the same space, but operating under completely different laws of physics. Understanding this divide is the first step to understanding its devastating consequences for us all. One of the most destructive consequences of extreme wealth concentration is the systematic defunding of the public sphere. Think about the things that make a society functional and fair: well-maintained roads and bridges, reliable public transportation, excellent public libraries, beautiful parks, and a robust social safety net. These are our public goods, the shared resources that we all pay for and all benefit from. But for decades there has been a relentless political project, heavily funded by billionaire interests, to starve these public systems. The strategy is simple: advocate for massive tax cuts, especially for corporations and the wealthy, and then use the resulting budget shortfalls as an excuse to slash funding for public services. This isn't an accident, it's a deliberate ideological choice. The goal is to shrink the role of government and open up more and more areas of life to private, for-profit companies. When the public school system is underfunded and struggling, it creates an opening for private charter schools and voucher programs. When public infrastructure crumbles, it creates an opportunity for private companies to build toll roads and bridges. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. First, you break the public system through austerity and neglect. Then you point to the broken system and argue that it proves government is incompetent and that the private sector could do it better. It's a slow-motion privatization of our society. The ultra-rich have a vested interest in this process. For one, they benefit directly from the tax cuts that create the budget crises in the first place. But more importantly, they are completely insulated from the consequences of decaying public services. When the public pool closes, their kids can swim in the private one at their country club. When the public transit system becomes unreliable, it doesn't matter, because they travel by private car or helicopter. They have the resources to buy private solutions to public problems, so they have little incentive to support robust funding of public goods for everyone else. They have effectively seceded from the rest of society. This war on public goods hurts the average person the most. It's the working family that depends on the local library for internet access. It's the student who relies on a well-funded public university to get an affordable education. It's the elderly person who needs a functioning public health system. When we allow our shared resources to be systematically dismantled, we are not just losing services. We are losing the very fabric of a cohesive society. We are moving towards a two-tiered system where the rich can buy first-class everything, and everyone else is left with crumbling, underfunded systems. This is the inequality divide in action, and it hollows out our communities from the inside. Perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence of the inequality divide is what it does to children. We love to tell ourselves that America is the land of opportunity, a place where any child, regardless of their background, can achieve their dreams through hard work. But for millions of kids, that promise is becoming a cruel fantasy. The reality is that a child's future prospects are now more dependent on their parents' wealth and status than ever before. We have created a two-tiered system of opportunity, where the children of the rich are groomed for success from birth, while the children of the poor and middle class face a growing number of obstacles. The ladder of social mobility is being dismantled, rung by rung. This starts from the very beginning. Wealthy parents can afford the best preschools, tutors, and enrichment activities. Music lessons, sports camps, coding classes. Their children's lives are meticulously curated to build the perfect resume for admission to an elite university. They live in neighborhoods with lavishly funded public schools, or they simply opt out and send their kids to exclusive private schools that cost more per year than a public university. These schools have small class sizes, state-of-the-art facilities, and extensive networks that give their students a massive head start in life. It's an entirely different educational universe from the one experienced by most American children. For children in less affluent communities, the picture is tragically different. They often attend overcrowded, underfunded schools with overworked teachers and outdated textbooks. These schools struggle to provide even the basics, let alone the array of extracurricular activities that are standard for their wealthier peers. Their path to college is filled with hurdles, a lack of guidance counselors, the crushing burden of student debt, and the need to work part-time jobs just to help their families make ends meet. The system is not designed for them to succeed. It is a system they must struggle to overcome. The idea that these two groups of children are competing on a level playing field is a complete fiction. This opportunity gap doesn't just harm individuals, it harms our entire society. It means we are wasting the potential of millions of bright, talented kids simply because they were born into the wrong circumstances. It creates a rigid, class-based society that looks more like an aristocracy than a meritocracy. The concentration of wealth at the top leads directly to a concentration of opportunity for the children of the wealthy, creating a cycle of inherited privilege that becomes harder and harder to break. This is the long-term legacy of the inequality divide, a future where your birth determines your destiny and the American dream becomes just that, a dream. The inequality divide is not an abstract concept, it is written onto the very map of our country. Where you live, your zip code has become one of the most powerful predictors of your life outcomes. It can determine the quality of your education, your access to healthy food, your exposure to environmental toxins, your life expectancy, and your chances of upward economic mobility. We are increasingly living in a society that is geographically segregated by income, creating islands of extreme wealth surrounded by vast seas of economic struggle. This physical separation deepens the social and political divides that are tearing our country apart. In affluent zip codes, residents enjoy all the benefits that come with concentrated wealth. They have pristine parks, safe streets, and well-funded public services. Their schools are top-notch, their property values are high, and their access to high-paying jobs is plentiful. These communities are able to use their wealth and political influence to hoard resources, ensuring that their corner of the world remains prosperous and protected. They are oases of opportunity, carefully guarded and maintained for the benefit of those who can afford the price of admission. This creates a powerful engine for reproducing privilege from one generation to the next. In stark contrast, low-income zip codes, often just a few miles away, face a daily battle with disinvestment and neglect. These communities suffer from crumbling infrastructure, under-resourced schools, and a lack of access to basic amenities like grocery stores, with fresh produce creating so-called food deserts. They are also disproportionately burdened with environmental hazards like polluting factories, waste treatment plants, and highways, leading to higher rates of asthma and other health problems. The jobs available are often low-wage and precarious. These are not failing communities, they are communities that have been failed by decades of policy decisions and systemic neglect. This geographical sorting has profound consequences for social cohesion. When the rich and the poor live in completely separate worlds, they lose any sense of shared fate or common purpose. It becomes easier for those in affluent enclaves to ignore the problems of poverty and inequality because they are literally out of sight and out of mind. It also fuels resentment and political polarization, as different communities feel they are playing by a different set of rules. Your zip code should not be a life sentence, but in an era of extreme inequality, it is increasingly becoming just that. Your address is becoming your destiny. The inequality divide has a brutal physical cost. One of the starkest and most disturbing measures is the growing gap in health outcomes and life expectancy between the rich and the poor. Wealth, it turns out, is the best health insurance policy you can have. The affluent live longer, healthier lives, while the poor suffer from chronic diseases and die younger. This isn't just about access to doctors and hospitals, it's about social and economic factors deeply intertwined with health, creating a deadly connection between your bank account and your well-being. For the wealthy, staying healthy is relatively easy. They can afford nutritious organic food, gym memberships, and personal trainers. They have access to the best medical care money can buy, including top specialists and cutting-edge treatments that are often out of reach for everyone else. They have jobs that are less physically demanding and offer paid sick leave so they can recover without risking their livelihood. Crucially, they experience far less chronic, toxic stress from financial insecurity, which contributes to heart disease and diabetes. For those with lower incomes, the obstacles to good health are everywhere. They live in neighborhoods with high pollution and limited access to safe exercise spaces. Unhealthy, processed food is cheaper than fresh fruits and vegetables. Their jobs are physically grueling, less safe, and rarely offer paid sick leave, forcing them to work even when unwell. The constant stress of making ends meet, worrying about bills, facing an uncertain future takes a massive physical and mental toll. This weathering effect grinds people down, leading to poorer health and shorter lives. This health-wealth gap is a moral outrage. In a country as wealthy as the United States, your income bracket should not determine your lifespan. A person in a rich neighborhood can expect to live 15 to 20 years longer than someone in a poor neighborhood just miles away. This is a profound failure of our social contract. The consequences of economic inequality are not just abstract numbers, they are measured in years of life lost, in preventable suffering, and in families torn apart by premature death. It is the ultimate, most tragic manifestation of the inequality divide. Beyond the economic and physical consequences, the inequality divide inflicts a deep wound on the soul of our society. It corrodes the essential elements that hold a community together: trust, solidarity, and a sense of shared purpose. When a society becomes this unequal, it ceases to feel like a unified nation. Instead, it fractures into a collection of competing tribes, each fighting for its own interests. The bonds of social trust, the belief that we are all in this together, and that others will play by the rules, begin to dissolve. This breakdown is one of the most dangerous and insidious effects of extreme wealth concentration. High levels of inequality breed suspicion and cynicism. People start to believe that the system is rigged, and honestly, they are right. They see billionaires avoiding taxes while their own wages stagnate. They see the wealthy buying political influence while their own voices go unheard. They see a justice system that treats the rich and the poor differently. This perception that the game is fixed makes people lose faith in core institutions, in government, in the media, in the economic system itself. When trust collapses, society becomes a more hostile and polarized place. People are less willing to cooperate, compromise, or invest in public goods that benefit everyone. This erosion of trust also undermines social solidarity. In more equal societies, people are more likely to feel a sense of connection and responsibility towards their fellow citizens, even those they don't know. They are more willing to support a strong social safety net and public services because they can imagine themselves or their loved ones needing them one day. But in a highly unequal society, the wealthy become increasingly detached from the lives of their fellow citizens. They begin to see the poor not as members of their own community who are struggling, but as an undeserving other. This fosters a harsh, individualistic ethos of "I've got mine," making it harder to build consensus for collective action to solve shared problems. Ultimately, the inequality divide threatens the very foundations of a democratic society. Democracy requires a basic level of social cohesion and a belief in the common good. It requires us to see each other as fellow citizens with a shared destiny. By creating a society of winners and losers, of insulated elites and struggling masses, extreme inequality pulls us apart. It fuels the politics of anger, resentment, and division. It makes it harder to confront major challenges like climate change or pandemics, which require a massive collective effort. The invisible poison of inequality is weakening our ability to function as a society, and that is a price that is far too high to pay. Alright, let's talk about the billionaires' final form, their ultimate evolution. After they've built the monopoly, crushed the competition, and dodged the taxes, they enter their final phase, the philanthropist. This is the part of the story we're all supposed to love. The billionaire, now older and wiser, decides to give back. They launch a massive foundation with their name plastered all over it. They pledge to cure diseases, end poverty, and save the planet. The media fawns over them. They are celebrated as saints, as saviors, as moral leaders. Their public image is transformed from a ruthless capitalist into a benevolent hero. It's a beautiful redemption arc, and it is, without a doubt, the most effective public relations strategy ever invented. This gospel of giving serves a critical purpose. It reframes the entire conversation about their wealth. It distracts us from asking tough questions about how that fortune was accumulated in the first place. Did they pay their workers a living wage? Did they pay their fair share of taxes? Did they destroy the environment to maximize profits? Suddenly none of that matters. All is forgiven because they are now giving a portion of it away. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card for their entire career. The act of large-scale charity functions as a moral money laundering operation, washing the dirt off the fortune and presenting it to the public as a clean, shiny force for good. Let's be real, this isn't just about pure altruism, it's about legacy and reputation management. For a billionaire, philanthropy is the ultimate status symbol. It buys them a seat at the table with world leaders. It gets their name carved onto university buildings and museum wings. It ensures that history remembers them not as a monopolist or a union buster, but as a great benefactor of humanity. It's a way to purchase immortality, to secure a positive legacy that their business practices alone could never justify. When you can't get into heaven, you might as well try to buy your way into the history books as a saint. It's the final and most prestigious acquisition. And we the public eat it up. We are so desperate for heroes and so conditioned to see wealth as a sign of virtue that we rarely question the arrangement. We celebrate the donation without interrogating the system that makes such a donation both possible and necessary. We applaud the billionaire for funding a new hospital wing, but we don't ask why we have a healthcare system that requires private charity to function in the first place. The gospel of giving encourages us to be grateful recipients of their generosity, rather than active citizens demanding a fair and just system for everyone. It turns a structural problem of inequality into a personal story of a rich person's kindness. When a billionaire pledges to give away their fortune, it sounds amazing. We imagine checks being written to soup kitchens and homeless shelters, but the reality of modern mega-philanthropy is often far more complicated, and frankly, a lot less helpful to people in immediate need. It's a sophisticated financial shell game, designed to maximize tax benefits and maintain control, often while doing very little to change the status quo. The first thing to understand is the difference between a pledge and a payment. A billionaire can get massive, positive press coverage for pledging to give away billions, but that money can sit in their private foundation for decades without ever reaching a real charity. This brings us to the primary vehicle for billionaire giving, the private foundation. When a billionaire gives money, they are often just moving it from their right pocket to their left pocket. They transfer stocks or other assets into a foundation that they and their family control. They get an immediate, massive tax deduction for the full market value of that donation, even though the money hasn't actually gone to anyone yet. The foundation is only required by law to pay out a measly 5% of its assets each year to actual charities. The other 95% can stay invested in the stock market, growing tax-free, and often generating more in investment returns than the 5% it pays out. The foundation's endowment can literally grow larger every year. So where does that 5% go? Often it doesn't go to the small, on-the-ground organizations that are in desperate need of funds. Instead, a huge chunk of billionaire philanthropy flows to other large, elite institutions that cater to the wealthy. We're talking about massive donations to their own alma maters like Harvard and Stanford, or to art museums and opera houses where they sit on the board. While these can be worthy causes, it's essentially the rich giving to the institutions that the rich enjoy. This does very little to address the root causes of inequality. It's a closed loop of giving that reinforces existing structures of privilege, all while generating great PR and tax breaks for the donor. Another popular tool is the Donor Advised Fund, or DAF. This is like a charitable savings account. A billionaire can dump money or stock into a DAF, get an immediate tax deduction, and then let the money sit there indefinitely. There is no legal requirement for the money in a DAF to ever be paid out to a charity. It has become a massive multi-billion-dollar black hole in the charitable world, allowing the rich to get the tax benefits of giving without the pesky obligation of actually, giving. It's the ultimate philanthropic trick, a system that allows you to be celebrated for your generosity while hoarding your wealth in a tax-free limbo. Billionaire philanthropy is rarely just about charity. It has become a powerful and tax-subsidized tool for advancing a specific political and social agenda, completely bypassing the democratic process. When a billionaire uses their private foundation to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into a cause they believe in, they are able to impose their personal vision on society with zero public input or accountability. It's a way to reshape public policy, from education to healthcare, according to the whims of a single wealthy individual. This isn't philanthropy, it's a form of private government, and the rest of us don't get a vote. Let's look at education reform. For decades, billionaires like Bill Gates and the Walton family have used their foundations to pour billions into reshaping American public education. They have aggressively pushed for policies like charter schools, high-stakes standardized testing, and specific teacher evaluation methods. You might agree with these ideas, or you might not. But the point is, these massive top-down reforms were not the result of a democratic debate among parents, teachers, and local communities. They were driven by the checkbooks of a few billionaires who decided they knew what was best for millions of children. When their preferred experiments failed, they could simply walk away and fund the next big idea, leaving public school systems to deal with the fallout. This apolitical power grab extends to almost every area of public life. Billionaires fund think tanks that produce research supporting their ideological goals. They fund advocacy groups that lobby for their preferred policies. They fund media projects to shape public opinion on key issues. And it's all done under the respectable banner of charity and subsidized by the taxpayer through tax deductions. In effect, we are all paying for billionaires to lobby for their own interests. They can use their charitable foundations to push for deregulation, privatization, and other policies that may directly benefit their own corporate empires, all while being praised for their generosity. It's a brilliant way to disguise political activism as selfless giving. This creates a dangerous power imbalance in our society. It allows the wealthiest individuals to set the public agenda and test out their pet projects on the rest of us. It undermines the role of democratically elected governments, which are supposed to make these decisions based on the public will. Instead, we get a system of philanthrocapitalism, where social problems are seen as markets to be disrupted by the brilliant insights of the ultra-rich. But society is not a startup, and citizens are not just customers. Using philanthropy as a Trojan horse to impose a private agenda is a profound threat to the very idea of a government of, by, and for the people. This brings us to the fundamental problem with billionaire philanthropy: accountability. Or rather, the complete lack of it. In a democracy, public power is supposed to be accountable to the public. We elect our leaders. If we don't like their decisions, we can vote them out. Government agencies are subject to oversight, public records laws, and a system of checks and balances. But a private foundation is a kingdom unto itself. A billionaire philanthropist is essentially an unelected, unaccountable social planner with a multi-billion-dollar budget. They can direct vast resources to reshape our communities, and there is absolutely nothing we can do about it if we disagree with their choices. Think about the power they wield. A single foundation can have a budget larger than the government agencies of many small countries. They can decide which diseases get research funding and which are ignored. They can determine the agricultural policies for entire continents. They can dictate the curriculum for thousands of schools. These are decisions that have life and death consequences for millions of people. Yet, they are made in private by a tiny, insulated group of people, usually the billionaire and their family or trusted advisors. There is no public debate, no transparency, and no mechanism to challenge their decisions. It's a deeply autocratic way to govern in a supposedly democratic society. This unaccountable power is often wrapped in the language of data, efficiency, and business-like solutions. Billionaire philanthropists often see themselves as rational problem solvers, applying the same genius that made them rich to fixing the world's problems. But social problems are not the same as business problems. They are complex, messy, and deeply political. They involve competing values and trade-offs. The solution that looks good on a spreadsheet in a Seattle boardroom might have devastating unintended consequences for a village in rural Africa. Without accountability to the people they are trying to help, philanthropy can become a form of benevolent colonialism, imposing solutions from the top down without respect for local knowledge or self-determination. Ultimately, the rise of mega-philanthropy forces us to ask a very basic question. Who should decide the future of our society? Should it be the public, acting through democratic institutions that, for all their flaws, are at least theoretically accountable to the people? Or should it be a handful of the wealthiest people on the planet, acting through their private, unaccountable foundations? By allowing so much public power to be concentrated in private hands, we are eroding the foundations of democratic self-government. We are outsourcing our collective decision-making to a new aristocracy of wealth, hoping their good intentions will be enough. It's a massive, risky gamble. After looking at the PR spin, the financial games, the political agendas, and the unaccountable power, we have to ask the final, most important question about billionaire philanthropy. Is it really a solution to the world's problems? Or is it just a symptom of a deeply broken system? The very existence of a philanthropic class with the power to reshape the world is perhaps the most damning evidence of the extreme inequality that created them. We have a system that allows individuals to accumulate more wealth than entire nations, and then we are supposed to celebrate when they give a fraction of it back to patch up the very social fabric that their wealth accumulation helped to tear apart. Think about the absurdity of it. We rely on the generosity of billionaires to fund medical research, but we have a tax system so full of loopholes that it prevents us from collectively funding that same research through our democratic government. We praise a billionaire for donating to a food bank, but we don't question the economic policies that result in their own employees needing to use that food bank to survive. Philanthropy becomes a way to paper over the cracks of a system that is fundamentally unjust. It treats the symptoms, poverty, lack of education, poor health, without ever addressing the underlying disease, a political and economic system that is rigged to channel wealth upwards. A world that depends on the whims of billionaires to solve its most pressing problems is a world that has failed. It's a sign that our public institutions have been starved and our social contract has been broken. Justice should not be a matter of charity. Access to healthcare, a quality education, and a clean environment should be basic rights for every citizen, not gifts to be handed down from the benevolent rich. By relying on philanthropy, we accept a world where these fundamental rights are subject to the preferences and priorities of an unelected elite. We are replacing the promise of democratic justice with the hope of aristocratic largesse. So, the next time you see a headline announcing a billionaire's massive donation, take a moment to think critically. Instead of just applauding the gift, ask why that gift is necessary in the first place. Ask what kind of system creates problems so large that only a billionaire's fortune can seem to address them. The truth is, a world with less need for heroic, large-scale philanthropy would be a healthier, fairer, and more democratic world. It would be a world where we solve our problems together through shared investment and collective action, not one where we wait and hope for a billionaire to save us. True progress is not bigger foundations, it's a world where they are no longer needed. Alright, so we've seen how the sausage gets made, we've seen how fortunes are built, how power is bought, and how charity is used as the ultimate PR move. It can all feel pretty overwhelming, like we're stuck in a game we can't possibly win. But what if we could change the rules of the game itself? This isn't about pitchforks and torches, it's about policy. It's about rethinking the system that created this mess in the first place. And the single most powerful tool we have to do that is something that's become a dirty word in American politics. It's time we had a real grown-up conversation about taxes. Because right now, our tax system is working overtime for the rich and barely at all for the rest of us. For decades, we've been sold a simple story. Tax cuts for the wealthy, and corporations are the secret sauce for economic growth. The idea was that they would take their tax savings and invest it, creating jobs and prosperity for everyone. It was called trickle-down economics. But after 40 years of this experiment, we can see the results. It didn't trickle down, it gushed up. All that money concentrated at the very top, fueling stock buybacks and speculative bubbles, not a new wave of well-paying jobs. We have to stop pretending this theory works. The first step to rethinking the system is to admit that the foundation of our current tax policy is a complete and total failure for the vast majority of Americans. So, what would a fairer tax system look like? It's actually not that complicated. It starts with making the rich and profitable corporations pay their fair share, just like you do. This means reversing the massive tax cuts they've received and closing the ridiculous loopholes that allow them to pay next to nothing. We need higher income tax rates on the highest earners. We need a corporate tax rate that isn't a joke. We need to tax capital gains at the same rate as the money you make from your actual work. These aren't radical new ideas. This is just returning to the kind of tax system we had for decades during a period of widespread American prosperity. This isn't about punishment, it's about building a functional society. The money raised from a fairer tax system is what pays for everything we need. It's the roads we drive on, the schools that educate our kids, the scientific research that leads to life-saving vaccines, and the social safety net that catches us when we fall. When we allow the wealthiest to opt out of contributing, we are starving our own communities of the resources they need to thrive. Rethinking the system starts with this basic principle. Those who have benefited the most from our economy should pay the most back into the system that made their success possible. It's not just economics, it's the definition of a fair social contract. Closing loopholes and raising income tax rates is a great start. It's essential. But honestly, it might not be enough to tackle the sheer scale of the problem. That's because our current tax system has a fundamental design flaw. It primarily taxes income, what you earn. It barely touches the real source of billionaire power, their massive accumulated wealth. As we saw with the buy, borrow, die strategy, the ultra-rich can live lavishly for decades without ever reporting much taxable income. Their wealth just sits there, growing and growing, largely untouched by the IRS. To address this, we need to start talking about a new kind of tax, one that goes right to the heart of the matter, a wealth tax. Here's the basic idea. A wealth tax is an annual tax on a person's total net worth, their stocks, their real estate, their yachts, everything after a very high exemption. We're not talking about taxing your house or your retirement savings. We're talking about a small tax, maybe 2 or 3% a year, only on fortunes over, say, 50 million or $1 billion. It's a tax specifically designed for the ultra-rich, the tiny fraction of the population whose fortunes have become so large, they are destabilizing our society. It's a way to directly counteract the runaway accumulation of wealth at the very top and ensure that those massive fortunes contribute to the public good. The arguments against a wealth tax are predictable. Opponents say it's too complicated to implement, that the rich will just hide their assets, or that it's unconstitutional. But, many other developed countries have had wealth taxes. We have armies of financial experts who can value complex assets. And we already tax a form of wealth every single year, the property tax on our homes. If we can figure out how to tax a middle-class family's 3-bedroom house, we can surely figure out how to tax a billionaire's private jet. These are not insurmountable obstacles. They are political excuses used to protect the interests of the wealthiest people on the planet. The real question is whether we have the political will to do it. A wealth tax would be a game changer. It would generate trillions of dollars in revenue over the next decade, enough to make transformative investments in healthcare, education, and green energy. But more importantly, it would act as a powerful brake on the runaway engine of inequality. It would slow the creation of dynastic fortunes that are passed down from generation to generation, creating a permanent aristocracy. A wealth tax isn't just about raising money, it's about rebalancing power. It's a statement that in a democracy, no single individual should be allowed to accumulate a fortune so vast that it gives them more power than the government of the people itself. Taxes are crucial, but they are only one part of the equation. We also have to address the imbalance of power in the workplace that allows corporations to suppress wages and generate such massive profits in the first place. For the last 40 years, the rules have been systematically rewritten to favor capital over labor. The power of unions has been decimated, the minimum wage has been allowed to wither away, and workers have been stripped of their ability to bargain for a fair share of the value they create. To truly rethink the system, we need to rebuild worker power from the ground up. This is about ensuring that the people who do the actual work get a bigger piece of the economic pie. The most important step is to make it easier for workers to form unions. Full stop. Unions are the single most effective tool for raising wages, improving benefits, and ensuring safe working conditions. We need to pass laws that strengthen protections for workers who are trying to organize and impose stiff penalties on companies that illegally intimidate or fire them. We should simplify the union election process so it's not a years-long, drawn-out battle against a corporation's army of lawyers and union-busting consultants. This isn't about forcing anyone to join a union, it's about protecting the fundamental right of workers to band together and bargain collectively if they choose to. It's about leveling a playing field that is currently tilted almost vertically in favor of the employer. Beyond unions, we need to raise the floor for all workers. That starts with a significant increase in the federal minimum wage to a real living wage, and then indexing it to inflation so it doesn't lose its value over time. No one who works a full-time job in the richest country in the world should live in poverty. We also need to crack down on the misclassification of workers as independent contractors in the gig economy, a scam designed to deny them basic rights and protections like minimum wage, overtime, and sick leave. These are basic standards of decency that ensure work is rewarded with dignity and economic security. Finally, we could explore more ambitious ideas that give workers a real stake in their companies. Some European countries, for example, require large companies to have worker representatives on their corporate boards. This gives labor a direct voice in the major decisions of the company, from executive pay to investment strategies. It fosters a more collaborative, long-term approach to business, rather than a single-minded focus on short-term shareholder profits. Rebuilding worker power isn't an anti-business agenda. It's an agenda for a more stable, more prosperous, and more equitable form of capitalism, where economic growth is shared by the many, not just hoarded by the few. We cannot fix our broken system without confronting the problem of monopoly. As we've seen, many billionaire fortunes are built on the back of dominant, anti-competitive companies that crush small businesses, stifle innovation, and exploit their power over consumers and workers. For most of the 20th century, America had a strong tradition of antitrust, using the power of the government to break up companies that got too big and too powerful. But for the last 40 years, that tradition has been abandoned. We have allowed a new generation of corporate giants, especially in tech, to accumulate a terrifying amount of market power. It's time to bring antitrust back. This means we need a new generation of trustbusters in our government agencies like the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission. We need regulators who are not afraid to take on big tech, big pharma, and big ag. This starts with blocking anti-competitive mergers that allow giant companies to swallow up their future rivals. The buy or bury strategy must be stopped. But we also need to look at breaking up the companies that are already too dominant. Does a company like Facebook, which owns Instagram and WhatsApp, need to be one single entity? Does Amazon need to both own the marketplace and compete with the small sellers on that marketplace? These are the kinds of tough questions that a serious antitrust agenda would force us to ask. A revitalized antitrust movement wouldn't just be about breaking up big companies. It would be about fundamentally rewriting the rules of competition for the 21st century. It means creating new regulations that promote competition and protect consumers in the digital age. This could include things like data portability, making it easy for you to take your social media data from Facebook to a new competitor. It could mean interoperability, requiring messaging services to work with each other, just like email does. The goal is to create an environment where new ideas and new companies have a fighting chance, and where consumers have real choices, not just the illusion of choice between 2 or 3 corporate giants. This is not about punishing success. It is about protecting the very foundations of a dynamic, innovative, and fair market economy. Monopolies are the enemy of capitalism. They lead to higher prices, lower quality, and less innovation. They concentrate economic and political power in the hands of a few, which is dangerous for both our economy and our democracy. By breaking up these modern empires and promoting genuine competition, we can create a more vibrant economy with more opportunity for everyone. It's a crucial step in dismantling the system that funnels so much wealth and power to the very top. Finally, and maybe most importantly, none of these other reforms, not the taxes, not the worker power, not the antitrust, will ever happen as long as our political system is drowning in the money of the super rich. Every attempt to create a fairer system will be blocked by an army of lobbyists and a tsunami of dark money campaign ads, as long as billionaires are allowed to buy political outcomes. The final, essential piece of rethinking the system is to fix our broken democracy. We have to get big money out of politics and return power to the hands of ordinary citizens. This is the bedrock on which all other change must be built. This requires a multi-pronged attack on the system of legalized bribery that currently defines our politics. We need a constitutional amendment to overturn disastrous Supreme Court decisions like Citizens United, to make it clear that money is not speech and corporations are not people. This is a long-term goal, but it's the only way to permanently fix the problem. In the meantime, we need strong legislation that requires all political spending to be transparent, so we can see exactly which billionaires and corporations are trying to influence our elections. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and ending the scourge of dark money is a critical first step. We also need to build a new system of publicly financed elections. Imagine if every eligible voter was given a small voucher, say $100, that they could donate to the candidates of their choice. This would empower millions of small donors and force candidates to seek support from a broad base of constituents, not just a handful of wealthy patrons. It would allow a regular person who wants to run for office to compete without having to spend all their time fundraising from the rich. It would fundamentally change the incentive structure for our politicians, making them more responsive to the people they are supposed to represent, not just their wealthy donors. This is the fight that matters most, because a government funded by and for the people is the only kind of government that will ever have the courage to take on the concentrated power of the billionaire class. Reclaiming our democracy is the key that unlocks all other possibilities for change. It's about restoring the basic promise of one person, one vote. It's about ensuring that the future of our society is decided by all of us through open debate and collective action, not in secret by the people with the biggest checkbooks. Rethinking the system is not just an economic project, it is a democratic one. It's about building a country where the size of your wallet doesn't determine the size of your voice. So, here we are. We've gone on a wild ride through the billionaire industrial complex. We started with the mystique, the fairy tale of the self-made genius in a garage. But we pulled back the curtain and saw the reality, the privilege, the public research, and the perfect timing that the official story always leaves out. We saw how these startup myths are not just stories, they are powerful PR tools designed to make us admire the winners of a rigged game, instead of questioning the rules. It's the foundational lie that makes everything else possible, convincing us that their extraordinary wealth is a product of pure merit, not a broken system. Then we followed the money. We broke down the playbook, step by step. Act 1. Achieve monopoly power through the buy or bury strategy, crushing any real competition. Act 2. Squeeze the labor force, fighting unions and minimizing wages to maximize profits. Act 3. Master the art of tax gymnastics, using loopholes like buy, borrow, die to hoard wealth while the rest of us pay our share. And let's not forget the government lifeline, the socialism for the rich that provides bailouts and subsidies while they publicly preach rugged individualism. This isn't an accident. It's a meticulously executed formula for extracting wealth from society and concentrating it at the very top. We saw how this economic power translates directly into political power. We mapped out the checkbook takeover of our democracy, from the dark money flooding our elections to the army of lobbyists and Gucci loafers writing our laws. We exposed the think tank echo chamber, manufacturing expert opinions to make a pro-billionaire agenda seem like common sense. We talked about the revolving door between government and industry, and the long-term project to capture our courts. It's a full-spectrum dominance of our political system, ensuring that the rules are always written by and for the people with the most money, leaving the rest of us shouting from the sidelines. And finally, we looked at the real-world consequences of this massive inequality divide. We saw how it creates two different planets, one for the ultra-rich who are completely insulated from reality, and one for everyone else. We saw the war on public goods, the growing opportunity gap for our kids, and the deadly connection between wealth and health. And we deconstructed the final act philanthropy. We saw how it's used as the ultimate reputation laundering operation, a tax-subsidized way to push a political agenda and exercise unaccountable power, all while being celebrated as a solution when it's really just a symptom of the core problem. That's the final tally. It's a system working exactly as designed, for the benefit of a tiny few. Okay, that was a lot. And honestly, it's easy to feel hopeless, like we're just tiny players in a game controlled by giants. But what if we took a second to imagine a different world? What if we actually implemented the changes we talked about? This isn't about some impossible utopia, it's about imagining a society that is simply fairer, more stable, and more democratic. A society where the rules are tilted back towards the public good. Imagine, for a moment, what that would actually look like. What could we afford? What could we build? What kind of lives could we live if extreme wealth wasn't being siphoned out of our economy? Imagine a world where billionaires and massive corporations just paid their taxes, not even a crazy amount, just their fair share. With that revenue, trillions of dollars over a decade, what could we do? We could have the best public schools on the planet, in every single neighborhood, with small class sizes and well-paid, respected teachers. We could make public colleges and universities tuition-free, freeing a generation from the crushing burden of student debt. We could invest in cutting-edge scientific and medical research to cure diseases and tackle climate change. We could build high-speed rail, modernize our power grid, and ensure everyone has clean water to drink and high-speed internet. These aren't pipe dreams. They are policy choices we could make if we had the resources. Now imagine a world with stronger unions and a real living wage. A world where worker power is a real check on corporate power. It would mean that the people who create the wealth would actually get to share in it. It would mean less poverty and less reliance on a tattered social safety net. It would mean more economic security for millions of families, the freedom to take a sick day without losing a paycheck, and the dignity that comes from being treated as a valued partner in a business, not just a cost to be minimized. This would create a stronger, more resilient middle class, which is the true engine of any healthy economy. And imagine a world where our democracy wasn't for sale, a world where our politicians were funded by the people, not by a handful of mega donors. The entire political conversation would change. Instead of debating which tax loopholes to keep for the rich, we'd be debating the best way to invest in our communities. Instead of being blocked by corporate lobbyists, we could finally pass meaningful legislation to protect our planet, lower the cost of prescription drugs, and guarantee healthcare for every single person. It would be a government that is actually responsive to the needs of its citizens. This isn't a fantasy. It's what democracy is supposed to look like. It's a future that is entirely within our reach. The story of billionaire power can feel like a spectator sport. We watch them on the news. We see their influence everywhere, and it feels like something that is happening to us. But the secret is, we are not just spectators. We are the main characters in this story. The system that creates and sustains billionaire power relies on one crucial thing: our consent. It relies on our silence, our distraction, our belief that this is just the way things are, and that nothing can be done to change it. The moment we stop believing that, the moment we realize the collective power we hold, the entire dynamic begins to shift. This power doesn't come from having $1 billion. It comes from the fact that there are hundreds of millions of us. Our power lies in our ability to organize, to speak with a unified voice, and to demand change. It happens when we support workers who are trying to form a union at a giant corporation. It happens when we join grassroots organizations that are fighting for campaign finance reform. It happens when we show up to vote in every election, from the local school board to the presidency, and choose candidates who are committed to fighting for the public interest, not just the donor class. Every single action, no matter how small it seems, is a way of reclaiming our power. Our power also lies in our ability to change the narrative. For too long, the story has been controlled by those at the top, but we can tell a different story. We can talk to our friends, our families, and our neighbors about these issues. We can share articles and videos that expose the truth. We can challenge the myth of the self-made man and the gospel of giving. We can shift the culture from one that idolizes extreme wealth to one that questions it. We can make conversations about tax fairness and monopoly power a normal part of our public discourse. Changing the story is the first step to changing the reality. This is not a partisan issue. It doesn't matter if you are on the left, the right, or in the center. The concentration of power in the hands of a few should be terrifying to anyone who believes in democracy and fair competition. The fight against a rigged system is a fight for everyone who isn't a billionaire. It's a fight for small business owners who can't compete with monopolies. It's a fight for working families whose wages have been stagnant for decades. It's a fight for every citizen who wants their voice to matter more than a billionaire's checkbook. The power we hold is the power of the many against the money of the few. And in a democracy, that is a power that can and must win. Let's get one thing crystal clear, because it's the oldest trick in the book. The moment you start to question the system of extreme wealth, you will be accused of one thing: envy. You'll be told you're just jealous of their success, that you're a hater, that you are engaging in the politics of envy or class warfare. This is a deliberate and cynical tactic designed to shut down the conversation before it even starts. It's a way to dismiss legitimate criticism of a broken system by making it about your personal feelings. So let's be perfectly clear, this is not about envy. This is about justice. This is not about hating the rich. This is about loving democracy. Questioning whether one person should be allowed to accumulate $100 billion is not an expression of jealousy. It's a question about system design. It's like a computer engineer looking at a piece of code that keeps crashing the whole system and saying, "Hey, I think we have a bug here." The existence of multi-billionaires is a bug in the code of our economy. It's a sign that the system is producing outcomes that are wildly out of balance and detrimental to the health of the overall structure. Pointing that out isn't envy, it's a diagnosis of a serious problem that affects every single one of us. This isn't about taking away someone's nice house or their fancy car. No one is arguing that people shouldn't be able to become successful or even wealthy. This is about a specific, extreme level of wealth concentration that is historically unprecedented and fundamentally incompatible with a functioning democratic society. There is a profound difference between a successful business owner who is a millionaire and a billionaire who has enough money to single-handedly sway an election or dictate public policy for millions. We are not talking about success. We are talking about a level of power that no single individual should ever have. So when you hear the charge of envy, recognize it for what it is, a desperate attempt to change the subject. It's a way to avoid talking about the real issues, tax policy, labor law, monopoly power, and political corruption. It's a way to protect the status quo by discrediting the critics. The correct response is to refuse to take the bait. The conversation isn't about how we feel about billionaires. It's about how we feel about living in a society where the game is rigged. It's about fairness, opportunity, and the simple idea that our economy and our government should work for everyone, not just for a tiny handful of people at the top. So we come to the end. And after all the data, all the stories, and all the arguments, it all boils down to one simple, ultimate question. It's a question we have to ask ourselves as individuals, and more importantly, as a society. What kind of world do we actually want to live in? Do we want to continue down this path, towards a future that looks more and more like a new Gilded Age? A techno-feudalism, where a handful of billionaires own and control the digital and physical infrastructure of our lives? A society of permanent winners and losers, where your destiny is determined by the family you were born into? Or do we want something different? Do we want to build a society where prosperity is broadly shared? A society where every child has a real opportunity to reach their potential regardless of their zip code? A society where hard work is rewarded with dignity and a living wage? A society where innovation thrives because of genuine competition, not where it is stifled by monopolies. A society where our democracy is vibrant and responsive to the people, a place where we solve our common problems together through collective action and shared investment in the public good. The choice between these two futures is the central challenge of our time. This is not a choice that will be made for us. It is a choice that we must actively make every day through our actions and our voices. It requires us to shake off the cynicism and apathy that this system is designed to breed. It requires courage to challenge the powerful narratives that protect the status quo. It requires us to have uncomfortable conversations, to get organized, and to believe that a better world is not only possible, but necessary. The dark truth about billionaires is not just that they have too much money and too much power. The dark truth is that their existence in their current form is a choice that we, as a society, are continuing to make. And so we end where we began, with the big question. The existence of a billionaire class with this much power isn't a law of nature. It isn't an inevitable outcome of technology or globalization. It is the result of a set of rules, and those rules can be changed. The future is not yet written. The power to write it belongs to all of us if we choose to claim it. So, what kind of society do you want? And more importantly, what are you going to do to build it? That's the real story, and it's just beginning.